So you've probably run into the situation where you have Next.js up and running and you need to monitor it more, both on the front end and back end. Well, I sat down with Luca and we walked through all of the little toggles that are added with Sentry. Go check it out. Need better search? Try Algolia, powering discovery. Welcome back, perfect peeps, to Code with CodingCat. Today we're going to be running through Next.js and how to add Sentry to it. With me today is Luca. Luca, can you give us just a brief background on kind of your role with Sentry?
Yes, of course. So first of all, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm Luca. I work at Sentry on the JavaScript SDKs. Specifically, I maintain the Next.js SDK, which is currently one of our biggest SDKs that we have.
It's kind of fitting. The biggest meta framework is your biggest, so that totally checks out. So I've gotten a lot of responses lately to for these Code with CodingCats to just kind of dive in and get started with things. So I think if you don't mind walking me through kind of how to get things rolling and where to head to, that would be perfect. So I'll switch over to code mode.
I'd say let's just follow our onboarding. I don't see this page too often as a developer myself, but let's just click the start button for install Sentry.
I love the hanging exclamation mark. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, our creative team is really good.
And we're going for Next.js?
Yes, that is correct.
Cool.
Yep. Okay. So now it tells us to use our command line wizard.
Perfect.
We've dabbled with it before, but let's just try it out. Right. We're on SaaS, and we already have an account.
Cool.
So now the wizard connects to your account, and it allows you to select your project, which has already been created through the step before. So if you just press enter, Sentry is now installing the necessary dependencies for your Next.js project, which is just the add Sentry Next.js package on version 8. And now it's going to ask us a few questions of what kind of SDK features we want to have. So this one, for example, is about circumventing ad blockers to send events to Sentry. Unfortunately, at one point, Sentry has been put on some ad blocker lists. And it turns out it's pretty hard to get removed from these lists again. We've talked to the people who maintain these lists, but they're pretty hesitant to remove us. I promise we don't do anything shady, but it is what it is.
I actually do love this, and we use the yes option. So that would be cool to go through for CodingCat because of the ad blocking. We actually run Brave for the most part, especially at work. Since I work for a security company, essentially, it's really powerful. So let's roll with that.
Let's go for it. Okay, so now a bunch of stuff has been printed to the console. I walk you through it.
Sweet.
After the previous question, the wizard said we created a fresh Sentry server config TS file and also a respective client and edge config TS file. These are the configuration files that allow you to configure the SDK for the different runtimes that exist in Next.js. Of course, we have the server, we have the client, which will run in the browser, and we also have the edge runtime. Additionally, the wizard created an instrumentation TS file, which is actually a Next.js feature, which is intended to be used to instrument your applications, meaning like adding monitoring and stuff like that. All this file does is import our configs. So in these configs, we initialize the SDK. So Next.js makes sure that this register function is ran as the very first thing when starting a server. So everything that happens is instrumented.
Cool.
This feature is actually experimental, but the folks over at Vercel have been very helpful at improving this instrumentation function to fit our needs. So if they listen to this, thank you. And what the wizard also did was add some changes to your next.config.mjs.
And just for those, if you're kind of coming from a non-current version, MJS is just saying that it's the modular version, essentially.
Correct. So these it's import statements instead of the usual require if you're used to that from Node.js.
Yep.
Right.
Cool.
So we see with the Git changes actually in your editor that a few lines have been injected and changed. And the biggest change is importing the with Sentry config function and wrapping your next config with this function. So what the SDK does here is do a bunch of magic to your Next.js app in order to instrument everything. So we can go through the options one by one, actually. We set an organization and a project. This is so we can upload source maps to your project in Sentry, like associated with your application essentially. So that if you send minified errors to Sentry, Sentry is able to unminify them for you and show you the exact line of code where your errors happen. The silent option is just there to like silence whatever the SDK is logging. I usually turn this off unless it's CI, because in CI it's actually interesting when things don't go well. Locally, doesn't really matter. The widen client file upload option is just so that we're uploading a larger set of source maps. This is actually a historical option because we've seen that sometimes source maps get very huge. We have had instances of users uploading like upwards of few gigabytes of source maps each build.
I have lots of questions for you around this.
That's great. I'm the man to talk to. The tunnel route option is what we've configured before with the question in the wizard. This is about circumventing ad blockers. Hide source maps is about simply removing a comment from your JavaScript files that points to source maps so that the browser doesn't attempt to load them. The disable logger function is there to like reduce the bundle size impact of the SDK. The SDK has a debugging functionality that you can turn on, where it just prints a bunch of logs stating what it does. However, all of these logs are quite expensive in terms of bundle size. So with this disable logger function, we're able to tree shake all of these log statements out, so you don't have as much bundle size. And the automatic Vercel monitors feature is about using our cron's monitors feature when you're on Vercel. When you have cron jobs configured in Vercel, we automatically instrument them for you and notify you when they don't run or when they failed and stuff like that. And that's pretty much it. That was the entire setup. And hopefully if we
just to quickly review, like this configuration is the first part. So the with Sentry instrumentation, I think, runs right after configuration, or
the instrumentation file is compiled during next build.
Yep.
But it is the first thing that runs when you start the Next.js server, meaning like in dev or production mode, it doesn't matter.
And so essentially what this is doing is it's saying, is this Node.js? If it is, we're going to look at the server config.
Correct.
Pretty standard stuff. We could probably talk about traces, sample rate, as we get going here. Debug, same sort of thing. Edge is almost identical, and I think client has a few extra pieces for replays and stuff that we should talk about as well, because I got 429s all over the place when I first set this up.
There's lots to talk about. Right.
Cool. Are there any other files? Just package, global error, it looks like, added as well?
Correct. So this is about intercepting errors that bubble up in your React application in your render functions. We haven't found a better way of instrumenting this, so you'll need to add this. It simply like records an error with this capture exception function, which is very notorious for Sentry to record errors, and reports them to Sentry. That's basically it.
Cool.
Right.
Awesome.
If we go back to the terminal, it actually tells us to check something. Or like asks us even more stuff, which is great. It asks us whether we want to create a Sentry example page to try out the SDK setup, which I do recommend in this case.
Let's try that out. Yep, we're going to use Vercel for our CI/CD, so yes to that.
Let's go. Okay, so here's an auth token. Let's try not to show this to anybody, but this auth token is used to upload the source maps to Sentry. just as a means of authentication.
So I'll copy that for now, and then we'll add it to Vercel, I believe.
Yep, that sounds good. For local development, the wizard has created a environment file that also contains this auth token, but it has been automatically git ignored, so that you don't accidentally put it into version control.
Cool. Very nice. Okay. So let's see here. What do we have left? Yes, continue.
Cool. That was it. We successfully installed the Next.js SDK. We can now try out running the dev server and look at the example page that has been created. Small warning, the example page is very ugly. It's on my to-do list to make it a little bit prettier.
Oh, it looks like we're still in the CLI. Let me kill that, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's fine to just kill it. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll actually, so far, like, this is everything. So we can take a quick look at what that page looks like. So there's an API for an error page, it looks like, that we're going to throw an error. And also a page, like a full page with an error in it as well.
Yeah, we'll see that one in a second.
Cool.
Algolia helps you create a search and discovery engine in 3 steps. Step 1, import your data. Import the API client, initialize the client and index, load the local JSON file, and then push to Algolia. Step 2, configure relevance. Define searchable attributes, add business metric, specify facets and filtering. And step 3, build your search UI, import widgets from the library, add instant search component, add search input, refine by attribute, display results, add pagination. And just like that, you're done. Build search effortlessly with Algolia.
All right, so this is our normal hosted page, no problems. And then what we're going to take a look at is the Sentry example page. Okay, so far so good. No error. And then we throw error. Oh, no.
Yep.
Cool.
Right. So now that we've thrown an error in the front end, we can actually take a look in Sentry and see if the error has appeared. Let's hope this is the case. It's always like with these demos, I'm always a bit scared that stuff.
Drum roll. Yeah.
Cool. It looks like it's there actually. Perfect.
So it's interesting. The example API went, but the page, it's because it called it. Is that right?
Exactly. So what this page does is you can even look at it in the code. It's very simple.
Yeah, let's take a peek. So we click the button.
Right. So there's an on-click handler for the button. And what it does is it starts a span, which is like our API for creating performance measurements.
Okay.
And you provide a callback, and everything that happens in a callback is then tracked performance-wise. And within this callback, we call our API route that we've created with the wizard as a simple test. And if the response is not okay, meaning, for example, if it threw, we also throw an error in the front end. And this is really just to showcase how Sentry is able to help you figure out why errors in the front end are happening. For example, if your backend is throwing and your front end is throwing because of it, you likely want to know like why your front end threw. And Sentry is able to help you identify the things through because your backend through, and that's really cool. We can look at it in a second. But that's basically everything this page does.
So actually, like if I look at issues, there should be 2, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So if you go there, there's 2 errors. There's the front end error and the API route error. And let's say, for example, you only look at the front end error now. Maybe we can just look at the issues page for a second.
Sure.
Let's click away all these upselling pop-ups.
Let's do that. Is there anything here that says, hey, other than like the actual error message saying it in it, is there a way to know this is front end versus back end? I guess there's like a GIF.
So what we do is that for the error events, we tag them with a runtime. So in the custom search above, you could filter for front end and back end if you wanted to. This search is a little bit involved, but I think if you search for runtime and enter a colon, I hope.
Or is it?
I think we might have removed that in a release today. It's probably like something.
All good.
Maybe if we look at an event, we can figure out what the value is that we need to look for. So here we can look at the front-end error, and we get a bunch of information, including the browser. So this is a nice indicator that it's a front-end issue and not a back-end issue.
Sorry, where's it say that? I'm missing it.
Or yeah, it's in the event highlights. There's like a tag saying that it was Chrome.
Gotcha. I find I love using Sentry, but I find like there's so much information, it's almost overwhelming sometimes. So like I'd love to walk through some of like how to find, like this is a pretty simple one, but it's like non-compiled code and all that fun stuff. So we'll have to take a look at a CodingCat one and see what we can do with it.
For what it's worth, I agree with you that the issues page is incredibly busy. But we know about this. Like we use Sentry all the time to monitor Sentry even.
Right.
And it's very busy, and it's always on top of our minds to improve this page. But it's pretty hard because it turns out errors have a lot of information you can
totally.
Like,
no, I get it. I think it just takes a lot of getting used to. And so here's one of the things that we probably don't usually get as kind of a developer. We're usually on logs or like something more technical. I find it cool that in the replay session, you can play this out and see exactly like where my cursor went, even though all the values are obfuscated. It actually shows like the full deal of what happened. So, and then you can see exactly what the user did to click on it to get that exact error event.
Yep. This feature is called Session Replay, and it basically what it does under the hood is it records your DOM and all the changes that happen to your DOM. And while the changes happen, they're streamed to the Sentry servers, and Sentry will then stitch back together all the pieces that were of changes that were sent, and we basically render your page in an iframe right here to reconstruct what has happened to your page. And when I first saw this feature, my mind was blown because it was so like crazy.
It's really cool. I love it.
Yeah.
This is where I got myself in trouble though, because I was doing so much replay, and turns out maybe you need to turn that down a little bit. So we can chat through that too.
For sure.
So then we get finally down to the exception level, which we already kind of know because we manually threw the Sentry front end error. It's nice to see some of this though. Can we explain like the word breadcrumbs threw me off forever, but so what is this actually like walking us through?
Right. So breadcrumbs is a pretty old feature actually. It was way before we added this video functionality, the session replay functionality. So back in the day, it was very useful to like, or you needed basically something to tell you what the user did in order to reproduce an error, because sometimes errors just happened and you had no clue how they happen or how like it came to be. So breadcrumbs are a useful way of knowing like what happened before the error was triggered. Gotcha. So in this case, there's not a lot going on here, but we can see that there was a navigation through the example page. The user clicked a button, or rather you clicked a button.
Yeah. We
made an API call. A Sentry transaction was created, which is also like similar to a span, a performance measurement, and suddenly an error happened. So we can sort of reconstruct what was done on the page to produce this error. In this case, it's very obvious. Usually it's a bit more complicated because more stuff is going on. This is where replay is very handy because it like shows you very clearly the steps the user has taken.
Now, if you didn't actually use like the span feature or throw this to Sentry, would this still get picked up in some way?
I don't think so, simply because when you turn off tracing, we would like to tree shake it away so it doesn't affect bundle size.
Gotcha.
So it actually doesn't do anything.
Okay, interesting. Let's see what else is in here. Just some user agent stuff.
Right.
It's kind of just standard browser information, it looks like.
Exactly. Arbitrary tags. You can also set like additional information yourself if you really wanted to. You could set like stuff like user cohort if a user is paying or on a pro plan or whatever. Like If the user is in the checkout, maybe you can add an additional tag to just like help you also triage important issues over stuff that you may not care about.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised it's just showing Chrome. I thought there was a Brave name in here somewhere, but it's all good. That's what's
there was a bit of a lockdown on user agents, I think, because of all the browser tracking stuff. So it isn't as useful as it was before, but still it's very useful because sometimes errors only happen on iOS Safari, and you would like to know that.
So let's compare that to just the straight up like Git error that occurred. So this is the 500 in our API route handler.
Right. It should look pretty similar. We again get the stack trace with the exact line of code where the error happened.
So I like that, like if this wasn't JavaScript and you're running whatever else under the hood somewhere, it would throw a Dart message or something like that.
Yep. Sentry supports all kind of programming languages, so which is sometimes painful to get every SDK aligned with all the product features. Like we have lots of meetings and discussions how we do things. But yeah,
I think it gets crazy interesting when you start looking at all of this.
There's lots of internal code. It's not just Sentry, but also Next.js internals. It's all ugly. This is why we auto collapse it. We only show you the important stuff. Right.
Nice. So it actually calls out a session replay in the Git side of this. Is that something that's possible?
No, session replay is only a browser feature. We've recently, I think, released a beta for mobile, so you can also have session replay on mobile platforms. Funny thing, I don't know if that's interesting. We have a small hackathon coming up. It's called Hack Week, and my goal is to do session replay for the server with an intern that is currently at Sentry, which would potentially allow you to travel back in time when looking at stack traces, which would be kind of cool. But
that's very cool.
Spoiler, I don't know. Hopefully it gets shipped one day. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I like it. And so it shows some cookies that came through. I know app@, is technically something I'm working on for Fusion Auth right now. So that's a JOT token that's floating around. I know as well that this is HTTP only. So just be careful, I guess, if you're kind of floating this around a little bit. Not that any of these can't be seen in the browser, just in general, like there's some cookies out there that aren't used by JavaScript and stuff like that.
It's definitely a concern to not send sensitive data to Sentry. Like you should always check what you're collecting with Sentry and stuff.
Yep.
We do have very extensive scrubbing rules for all kinds of auth information and stuff. So like whenever we ingest an event, like an error or transactions or spans or whatever, we look for certain patterns that are common, like credit card details or auth tokens, JOT tokens, and try to strip them away, because usually they're not really helpful in debugging your code. It's just sensitive data that's potentially being leaked.
Sure, makes sense. It's funny, it did pick up Brave 126 on the on this side of the house, not the browser side, so that's cool.
Yeah, that's exactly, like the user agent got sent to the API route, but like from the JavaScript side, we're not able to fully pick it up.
It's always fun going through like all of this stuff and seeing how much information sites know about you. So that's always exciting. Cool. So we picked up both errors. What should we look at next? Is there like, you would say, go to this configuration next, or like, should I build it in Vercel and see the CI/CD? What do you think?
So one thing I would like to show you, because it's pretty cool and a lot of our time goes into it actually, is if you go back into either one of these issues, maybe a front-end issue.
Okay.
And you click on the, or you look at the top of the page. There's one, like, it's not really a noticeable feature, but it tells you one other issue appears in the same trace. No, it's a bit down below. It's like where this Next.js logo is. This basically tells you, you hovered over it just now.
Gotcha, sorry, missed it.
Yeah. This basically tells you that an error somewhere else happened that caused this issue. Cool. So if you click view full trace, you get to see the performance monitoring part of Sentry. And so this is what we call the trace view, I think. And it tells you how long certain operations took. So right here, we see certain spans. For example, the first span you see is a page load span. This is usually very important because it tracks how long it took for your page to load. So if you care about performance, you probably want to look at this actually, because it tells you exactly what kind of resources were loading. If you click on the plus, it will actually show you a lot more information. That's pretty handy.
Holy smokes. Yes.
And if you double click the page load span, like the thing we expanded,
page load,
just where you pressed plus.
Oh, sorry.
I think you need to press on the name. I gave this feedback like a day ago that the zooming is broken. If you double click it, no, just the name of the span. Yeah, we zoom into it, and now we can like see pretty clearly like how long the page load took. So, for example, the request before the first byte was sent, which is this TTFP marker, which is also a web vital, took like 0.8 seconds, which is, I'd say, rather long. I don't know. It's a dev server.
Yeah.
It's all right, I guess. But also all kinds of other stuff, like resources that have been loading, like, for example, JavaScript files. There's also a font that is loading. Also, I see you have Grammarly installed, so we even like get some measurements from Grammarly. And also, if the main thread is blocked for whatever reason, I don't know, when stuff is rendering very intensively or doing expensive JavaScript in the front end, we also generate spans for that.
Nice, that's cool.
Yeah, and also if you have any outgoing requests during the page load, which is a very common pattern with, I don't know, request waterfalls and stuff like that. We show you all of these requests in the page load transaction, and you're able to see how long it takes and how it affects your user's experience, which is pretty neat.
That's super powerful. I mean, you don't even have to go out to like page speed test or run Lighthouse, and like it's all here for you to dive into. It's awesome.
Exactly.
Is there a way to get to this kind of view where you want to see like page hits and performance without an issue occurring?
For sure. So on the sidebar, you see performance. If you click on that, nothing shows up, which is crazy. Maybe put a different date range. I think there might be some caching issues.
Okay. Like
last hour is probably good. Oh,
maybe I should run this maybe a few times.
I think it should be fine theoretically. I hope. Maybe check your projects. Is everything selected?
I think so.
Okay.
Oops. Project.
Sorry. If you go back to performance, it theoretically should maybe select front end or back end. Okay. How ironic. Sentry has bugs. That's probably something we need to fix here. But another way to find stuff is...
is this maybe something that's turned off in dev for that?
No, it shouldn't. Dev mode shouldn't affect anything. Like if we're able to see a transaction in the trace view, we should be able to see it here. This is usually the entry point that you pick in order to look at stuff. There's hopefully another way to look at things, which is the traces view, which has the beta tag. It's very classic. You build a new feature and the old features get, I don't know, dropped.
It's all good. Okay. Yes, for sure. We just saw me refresh right here.
Exactly.
Very cool. Awesome. A little faster here this time, I think.
Yep. And here, the slowest loading part of your page was apparently the icon.
Go figure.
Took 1 second. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's pretty cool. The one thing that is very useful to showcase, but it sucks a little bit when we have so few data points, is the web vitals view. Maybe I can pull out the Sentry project for a page we have, like we use at Sentry, which is our changelog, and I can show you some stuff there. Maybe that's useful.
Yeah, happy to show CodingCat too. We can take a look and see how far off that is. For like a standard website, like something as simple as CodingCat, it's basically just a glorified blog essentially. Is there any additional like setup changes that you would suggest at this point? So people, let's say, I don't even know, let's say you get 10,000 views per day. Is there anything in your configuration settings that you would suggest, hey, maybe this value should get updated because it's too much?
I think the defaults are probably fine. There is one pro feature I would suggest. It's actually pretty new, and I'm very excited about it. When you've used Sentry, you've used it in a front end, which many people do, you've probably noticed that you get a lot of noise in your issues because, contrary to no one's belief, the browser is a very controlled environment. People use all kinds of browsers. Some browsers are a bit shady and inject some JavaScript into web pages, and that JavaScript throws errors, or they have browser extensions, they throw errors. You get a lot of noisy stuff in your Sentry project. So one thing we've come up with is that we can actually mark your files as your code, which sounds a bit confusing. But whenever an error happens, we basically scan the stack trace for only those files or those stack frames that come from your code, and throw away the error if we think that other parties have been involved.
Oh wow! Okay.
So how do you set this up? It's a bit more. You need to add it to two places. First of all, you need to add it to the next config, because that is like the build configuration. There should be an option, and I need to memorize it. It's called, I think, experimental _. I know it starts scary, but you can trust me.
Maybe it's
is there code completion by any chance? That would be amazing. Otherwise, I can pull it up.
I can also just jump in here. I think Sentry build options. I don't know. Yeah, experimental instrumentation of client trace metadata. Those are the only two that are listed. I don't know if those are.
There should be a different one actually. Let me quickly pull it up. It shouldn't take too long. 20 seconds. We use it in our docs. Right, it's called unstable _. And then exactly this one. And the option you need to provide within this object is called application key. And here you can pick any arbitrary string that you would want to call your application. So it's like Sentry demo or something like that. Alex, sounds good.
Cool.
Great. And now you go back into the sentry.client config ts, which is the client-side configuration file. And you go into the integrations option, and you add an integration called Sentry third party error filter integration, correct? And this is a function. You give it an object, which is the options, and you again need to add an array called filter keys. And this array will basically filter for the application keys you have defined. And here we provide the string that we have configured in the next config.js.
Sentry debug, right? Demo.
Sentry demo, yeah.
So close.
And as a second field we need to provide.
Is this an object? Is that what it's?
No, this is already correct.
Okay.
There's a field missing in the options, which is called behavior, because you can choose how this integration behaves. There's 4 modes. They're all named very long. So if you start typing a string, there's 4 options. Okay. You can drop errors if there's 1 frame containing third-party code. You can drop an error if there's exclusively frames that contain third-party code. Or as an alternative, you can also just apply a tag. So if you're scared that you're going to lose data, you can just apply a tag by which you can then filter.
I like that. I like this one.
Go for it.
That sounds great.
And this is a very pro user feature. I don't know if we can show it off, but like I want people to try it because I found it very useful.
Cool. If we try triggering like another error, no, we'd need it in like something, right?
Yeah, it's hard to try out because you need like a third party that is involved to throw an error in your code.
I think my guess is if I were to add this to CodingCat, Firebase would probably throw something for us, I'm sure. So
probably, and then we'll get dropped and you'd eat up less quota. So it's great.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
It's very cool. So I'll put a pro tip. That's the commit for that one.
Is CodingCat on App Router or Pages Router?
App Router.
App Router.
Yeah.
That's good. Our instrumentation is a little bit better on App Router.
Cool.
So
I like it.
I hope you're on the latest SDK version.
I know I'm close, but maybe
you're close. Okay, I hope very close to the latest.
It might not be the latest, but maybe we can upgrade. We'll do it live. How's that sound?
Sounds scary.
So I definitely know there's some issues out here.
There's an invalid date period selected. I don't know what that means.
Okay, that's cool.
Right.
Yeah.
These look classic.
Yeah. So these are good ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like I'm always like, okay, something happened, but literally this page is a blog post, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oops, did not mean to do that. And so I'm like, well, what the heck's going on? And so this has been useful for us to like chat through this.
Yep.
So, like same deal. You kind of walk through this, right? Where do you get to? Like I don't even know. Like what is $RC? What is that?
Yeah. I think this plays very well into what I've been talking about before. Is that the browser is a very uncontrolled environment, and people can just throw errors in your page. And I think this is a little bit cheating because I have expert knowledge, but to me this error very much looks like something from a third party. What are the indicators for that? First of all, source maps aren't working. Usually when something throws in your code, you get source map errors.
Okay.
Like a stack trace pointing to your lines of code. I know for a fact that the stack trace, as it looks like here, means that something has injected a script tag into your page, most likely, and executed some code, and that code seemed to throw. So this issue is probably very unactionable for you.
So what do you like for stuff like this, where you're like, okay, I see it, I don't really care about it. What do you mark something like this?
In the top right corner, you can pick from a few options, like basically whatever you want. I would probably archive it or resolve it. Like,
okay.
Probably archive it for forever.
Archive it. Okay, cool.
Ideally, you add the third-party error filter integration that we just added, and you'll never get these issues ever again.
As soon as you started talking about that, I'm like, well, I know what I'll be adding because this happens to me all the time.
I think this issue noise that we have is one of the few big issues that we have in Sentry. One of these is source maps, which we've also attempted to solve, but let's see. Right, so speaking of source maps, this is a source maps error. Cool. Looks like there was there's some stuff missing in one of the source maps you generated. It is unfortunate. My best guess is that you maybe have some plugins installed that don't generate valid source maps or something similar. And I would also check the version of the Sentry SDK you're using. You see that if you scroll all the way down on the issues page, I believe. It's 8.11.0. So that's today. I think we released 8.22.0.
Jeez,
it's not too bad. It's
moving
not too
fast.
bad.
Yeah, you're moving fast. Okay, that's good to know.
But yeah, source maps didn't seem to work here. That's something fixable. I hope the issue is still actionable, but this one looked like it was actually coming from your code.
That's fair, yeah. Something that I would love to care about, but I just don't. I run Sentry Sanity IO for our CMS, and that runs off of /studio. I could give 2 cares about like the studio errors. Is there a way to say like these are all low priority or filter these out?
You can go into the Sentry.init options and
in the code?
In the code, yes. You could also do everything in Sentry, but it's a bit more involved. Like both are not super easy to solve. Like filtering based on a route needs some config.
Let's try it out. Let's see here. I have no idea where. I'm in a crazy branch. So let's check out dev. There we go. That should alleviate some of this craziness. So in here in the client, is that kind of where you're thinking?
Correct. So if these errors usually come from from the front end, then this is the place to be. Here we can set an option that is called before send. Correct, and it takes a callback, which as a first argument.
Is it just like a callback like that?
Exactly, like just a function.
Okay.
The first argument this callback takes is an event, which is basically what the SDK is attempting to send. So, so you need to put it in the function arguments, yeah. And as a default, we want to return the event from this function because this function basically acts as a filter. If you don't return anything from it, the event gets dropped.
Gotcha.
So as a default, let's return the event, and then above we'll add conditional rules in order to drop the event. Yep. Cool. Now we can, based on the contents of this event, drop the event. So yeah, you'll see a bunch of stuff. We probably want to add an if statement, for example, if the event is an error, which is signified by event.type equals undefined. It's very historical, simply because Sentry started out with errors and we never added a type for error.
Okay.
And event.context, I believe, .request. Is it request? Actually, maybe that's a good way for us to like investigate properly. So if we go into the dashboard again in Sentry,
okay.
There's a way to look at the event payload. So click on this issue from the studio, exactly. Now, top right corner, there's like curly braces. You can click and then you can view the JSON. Yep, that's a big one. And if we now search for /studio, which is the URL, we can basically say, yep, that's a tag. We could assert on the tag that's possible. What I would rather do is if there's other places. Culprit, I think, is not sent by the SDK. This should be sent, like this is done after the fact.
Okay.
There should be some other places. Right, it's the it's event.request.url.
Cool. Maybe this is that includes
something like /studio. Exactly.
Cool.
And then we can conditionally return null. And this now will basically drop all the events that happen on your studio page.
Awesome. I don't know if I'll check that in without us actually going through some testing.
Yeah, we'll try it out first.
No, I like it. That's cool. So that's just like one of the things. Is there anything else that would be common that people usually are, I don't know, they don't care about, or like, you know what we didn't talk about? So like refresh rates and things, or replays, I should say. Mm-hmm. First day, like I blew through my quota. What are some things that you would suggest to people to say, all right, if like you have a decent amount of pages getting hit, what are some settings you would adjust?
I'm gonna sound like a shill if I say this, but again, add the third-party error filter option. Simply because, yeah, you can see you have this replays on error sample rate, which is set to 1 right now. This basically means that a replay is going to be sent if there's an error happens.
Okay.
The third-party errors are really, really common. So you probably don't want to collect replays for those because they're usually unactionable. Like you don't care about these errors. You probably also don't care about the replays.
Yep.
If we're able to drop these errors before they're even sent to Sentry, we will also not send the replay for it. So this is just a proxy way of ensuring that the replays that you send are of higher quality.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm shielding this option all the time.
What about, we talked about some performance things that naturally occur that aren't necessarily on errors. What about those?
Right. So ideally, all of this is added out of the box. Basically, what the SDK does is instruments your browser. And one thing that is really useful to as an entry point to look at performance are web vitals. Because it's sometimes hard to gauge what parts of my applications are slow. Web vitals are usually a good indicator of which pages need improvement.
Cool.
So if we go in Sentry, maybe there's a web vitals tab you can look at. So I recently extracted our change log from our docs because for some reason it was in our docs repository and didn't make a lot of sense and there was a lot of dependencies. But there, it's now collecting data for us, and this is in our Sentry organization where we're also using Sentry. And on this web vitals page, you can see a bunch of let me make this a little bit bigger. You can see a bunch of web vital data on certain pages. And some of them perform better than others. And I found a pretty funny reason for that, actually. Let's hope I find the reason. So you can go into individual, how do you say, pages in this view. And you can see, okay, there's one that has bad performance. So let's maybe look into it and we'll gain some insights. And then we can see the web vitals. First contentful paint of 2 seconds is pretty bad, and time to first byte of 1 second is also pretty bad. Don't think we can affect this too much, but let's see. Let's go into one that has a bunch of data and is poor. Maybe let's look at this one. And we see that, okay, for some reason, our page load took 57, looks like seconds.
Wow. Holy smokes. Yeah, that's not great.
Yep, that's pretty bad. And we can let's look into the page load a bit more, and we'll see why it took so long. And here we can see, okay, it's just a bunch of JavaScript loading. This is just some file we have. This is actually not the example I was looking for. I was more hoping for an image that is slow, because I've noticed in our changelog, let me show you, Sentry.io/changelog. Once you click onto a page, these images are huge.
Oh.
And they're not optimized. And I've only realized this because I looked at performance data in Sentry. So let's maybe look at this changelog. It's called Session Replay Mobile.
I think this is a good time for a shout out to our Cloudinary sponsor as well.
Absolutely.
Minimize all those images, folks.
This looks right. Yeah, we can already see there's some slowness. Will it show is the question. So we can look at the web vitals here. What is taking so long? So the time to first byte is 2 seconds. This is just the request. There's probably not a lot we can do. We're not doing any dynamic rendering or anything that we can optimize. we can expand the API request and see, okay, what did Next.js actually do to render our request? If we close the page load again, we can actually see, okay, these are the server components that have been rendering, and none of them take a very long time. It's just like 100 milliseconds. That's usually fine. Next.js apparently takes a lot of time just like figuring out which server components to render. Here it's 1 second, which might just be us. I'm not sure. Maybe it's Next.js. But let's go back to the changelog, to the page load transaction. We can actually see, okay, there's a font that we're loading, which takes 600 milliseconds, also pretty slow. Okay, but the image loaded actually quite fast, so it was fine in this case. Maybe there was some hot cache that was good or not. We can find a different one, or maybe it was fixed and I didn't notice.
You could also try like a hard refresh on your page. Maybe it'll pick it up immediately, like real time.
It's a good point. If we disable the browser cache, that would be, sorry, this probably looks horrible for you right now.
It's all good.
It appears to be loading fine. Maybe we're good. Maybe somebody fixed it and now the demoing is bad. But
I think I definitely get the idea, and I think the user too. Like you can kind of finally go in and dig through those. So that's an awesome way to look at it.
Exactly, and so like these inside modules are perfect to like get entry points into investigating what slowness your application might have, because it's really hard sometimes like to know, okay, what button clicks are slow, what, I don't know, pages load slow. These are good entry points. For example, this requests module shows you outgoing requests to somewhere. So if your page is communicating to, I don't know, third-party APIs that may respond slow, you'll see it here. You can dig into, I don't know, stuff like maybe your AWS bucket or your GCP bucket and see if that's responding slow for whatever reason.
Totally.
There's also a queries view that you can use to see which queries take how long and how long your application spends time on them. Our changelog doesn't get too much traffic, so the values here are rather low. But these are good entry points to look at if you want to improve the performance of your application.
So those selects are actually occurring server side, and you're picking those up?
Correct, yes. So in the case of our changelog, we're using Prisma.
Yep.
And we have an admin page where people in the company can add blog posts and they can like draft them and at some point publish them. And these are all the operations that happen for this. The SDK automatically instruments the Prisma client. Actually, this is a feature that Prisma has itself. Like it emits open telemetry data that our SDK is able to pick up. And we're using that data, send it to Sentry, and then we extract all the query data that happens in these, that is included in all of these spans. And we can show the queries, how long they take, also like in what API routes they're called. So sometimes you have the same query in different places and it might be slow in one place.
Yep, that's cool.
Another. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Very cool.
Also, there's an assets view. So for any static assets you may have, like JavaScript files, images, fonts, if any of them are hogging all of your loading time, you'll see it here. For example, we're loading, it takes all of our users in total like 1 hour, almost 2 hours to just load static JavaScript, which is quite intense.
That is crazy. Holy smokes.
Stuff we're also working on is caches. We don't have this in our changelog, so it's hard to showcase. A bunch of mobile stuff, and also if you're into like LLMs, there's for Python LLM monitoring where you get insights into your machine learning pipelines, and when you use OpenAI, for example, like OpenAI API token usage, stuff like that.
When you talk about caches, where is that cache layer occurring?
So basically, when you usually when you interact with caches, like for example Redis, you use, I don't know if it's called an ORM in that case, but you use some kind of library to interact with Redis.
Okay.
In the JavaScript ecosystem, the Redis library is really popular, for example. Surprise, surprise. And what we're doing is we're patching this library to emit performance data and just record spans for the operation that that you do, and then aggregate this data. And you're able to provide the SDK with cache keys, so we know which operations on Redis are actually cache operations, and those you can then query for in this tab.
That's cool.
We record like cache hits or cache misses and stuff like that.
So this is kind of back in our Vercel deployment for our next with Sentry that we deployed out. If I look at our deployment, so it did work. Everything's good. I just wanted to take a look at our build logs. So I want to show you kind of this one, and then I'll show you what CodingCat looks like. So pretty straightforward. You get the normal kind of Next.js, and then you start to get into like this instrumentation hook, which has some of the Sentry details. And then the sources this is kind of, you have to pay attention to when you're looking at source maps, because this gets intense sometimes. So so here's the actual upload report side of it. And you'll see what 1254.07. I think so. It finished. That was actually fast. I'll show you mine.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Source maps are not cheap, unfortunately. Like all the tooling around it is pretty slow.
Yeah,
it's because
it almost doubled our build time, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. That's what you get for picking observability.
Yes, exactly. So here's some telemetry stuff that's already occurring. So options set to false. And then I was going to say there should be another, here it is, the other set of source files, right? 1254.15.
So Next.js does 3 build passes, one for client, one for server, and one for edge. And we need to upload source maps for each one of these. So this is what you're seeing right here. Under the hood, the SDK does actually a lot of things here.
Yeah.
Also some pretty innovative stuff, I might say. One big part was previously it was very hard to associate stack frames with source maps, because obviously when there's a stack frame in Sentry or any other monitoring platform, you need to somehow associate that stack frame with the source file and the corresponding source maps file. And that is actually a pretty hard problem, because stack frames are more dynamic than you would think. Like people change where they host their stuff. People have dynamic routes, and all of this changes how stack frames look.
Totally.
So we needed some kind of way to statically associate stack frames with source maps and stuff. So this is why we came up with debug IDs. And these are all these like IDs that you see in the build log. They help us associate stack frames with source maps.
Nice.
And we've actually done a TC39 proposal about debug IDs.
Oh, really?
Yes, we're able to participate in a few meetings, like trying to push that through.
That's cool.
Yeah, just needs a lot of work, unfortunately. Like browser vendors need to implement them. Bun has already implemented them, thankfully.
Bun, always pushing forward.
Yep, it's great.
So here's CodingCat.dev, and here is the build file. We do dynamically render everything like once it's up, so the CMS basically gets all of the data. So we're not like every time we post, it's not using MDX or anything like that. It is using Next.js, but you'll kind of start to see we have a few more packages going on, like normal production type products. Nothing major though, nothing too extreme. I would say the biggest thing is probably the Sanity Studio itself. So some of the things that I've noticed, which are interesting, I think their colorization is picked up upon words instead of like tokens. And so it'll show things that are errors that are at least in red that are not errors and things like that. actually don't know what those are. That looks like our
That's not
fonts.
Sentry.
Yeah, that's interesting. Font fails on that, but whatever. I don't think I've seen that one before. So if we start to get down, here's kind of that source map for us. So 215053, and you'll see these turned orange because
Yep.
there's warning right here.
Yep, exactly. It's a bit unfortunate. We've given this feedback, but
every time I saw it, I was like, what am I doing wrong?
yeah.
And so it takes like that whole time was to load. Again, you think something might be going wrong here, but really it's saying sending error performance telemetry. So it's same kind of deal. What I was running into, and I think I contacted you about this right at one point, was that our builds were failing once I introduced Sentry. What I ended up having to do, and I'm not going to show off my environment variables, but there's a way to not use build cache ever, which is kind of unfortunate. But that was the only thing I could do to kind of start to get around that for our builds. And I think there's something related on the Vercel side, more or less, that's causing that issue. So now I'm sending reports to them too. So we'll see where that ends up.
I totally don't blame you. There's a lot of moving parts, including Vercel, including Sentry, and I'm not gonna act like we're not doing a lot of things. I mean, this is what people pay us for, essentially, to
do
the messy stuff.
Yep.
So it's probably not your fault. Sometimes it is user fault, but also these build errors are very hard to troubleshoot for everybody involved because everybody only sees their part. Like, it's very much black box. I'd love to see Vercel code because then I would have to troubleshoot less whenever we get user reports.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, just know, like, I'm not saying CodingCat's a massive site or anything like that. It's essentially a glorified like blog plus like the Sanity Studio is its own thing. So that has kind of like a static package, and then our courses. Our courses are a decent amount just because there's like Firebase login and things like that. So there's probably every part and piece that you would get in a normal website that's loading up. But just know, like, those are all the default settings for the most part have been working to get the Sentry side. It looks like we maybe uncovered some web vitals and things like that weren't quite working for some reason. I just haven't paid attention to it yet. So as far as errors though, it's been great. When I launched mine, every environment triggers. So like the preview environments, I can let those run, or my dev environment, I can let that run. And I can actually see errors coming out way prior to any of the production stuff occurring. So it's been cool. It's been great. Any last minute thoughts? Did we miss anything that we should kind of cruise over?
While we were talking about source maps, I thought about one crazy statistic because we're collecting telemetry data for how much people upload source maps.
Yeah.
And because they're so big, over the last 90 days, I'm just looking at the dashboard right now, people have uploaded 220 terabytes of source maps to Sentry. And this includes 1.5 billion files.
That's
and
amazing.
This doesn't even cover all of our like uploads. This is probably like half of it, if not less. So it's an insane amount. Yeah, I kind of want to push internally to optimize the upload endpoint a bit so the builds don't take as long. I think there's some optimizations we could do.
What do you guys end up doing? Like, obviously with the source maps, they have to be hot to some degree, I would assume. Do you like throw into cold storage after like the next build, or like that's a lot of data?
That's a crap ton of data, actually. So we compress them, put them behind some abstraction of a GCP bucket.
Sure.
I think we cache them, and I think you will get a long tail of like source maps that are needed very often and source maps that are basically never needed.
Yeah.
And we keep track of which ones are needed, and at some point we just wipe them off the cache, of course, and also delete them off of our platform if they're not used for long enough. I think the time frame is something like 90 days, if not longer, or maybe even more months. I don't know. But yeah, it's a huge amount of data, and
that's crazy. Yeah.
We had a team basically dedicated to just serve source maps and symbolication, because that's also not a trivial operation. Yeah, it's cool stuff. It's actually impressive.
Yeah, that's very cool. Love that. Well, Luca, very much thankful for you to come on and show off how to use Sentry Next.js, and maybe in the future we'll show off a couple more frameworks. We'll have you back on and do Svelte or something like that as it comes out.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Take care.